Imagine being stranded alone on an island with no boat, no supplies, and no idea whether anyone is coming. Would you rather wake up surrounded by deadly animals, or inside an active volcano, or on a piece of rock with nothing to eat, drink, and hide behind? Welcome to a list of the worst islands in the world to be stranded on. To find the worst, we are looking at how long an ordinary person could survive there, and whether rescuers could reach them before it was too late. As the list goes on, both become increasingly unlikely. Island number 8 is an active volcano where the ground beneath your feet can explode with almost no warning. Number 7 was deliberately contaminated with anthrax spores, capable of killing 9 out of 10 people who breathed them in. On number 6, called literally Inaccessible Island, shipwreck survivors spent months eating penguins, and one of them even used penguin blood as ink to document what happened. On number 2, rescuers could know your exact location and still be completely unable to reach you. And the final island has no fresh water, no vegetation, and barely enough space to stand, yet one man somehow survived there alone for 45 days. So, which island is truly the worst? For now, let's start with island number 9. We begin on an island where rising seas trapped a population of snakes thousands of years ago, forcing them to evolve into tree-climbing hunters found nowhere else on Earth. The island is Queimada Grande, better known as Snake Island, located just 35 kilometers, or 22 miles, off the coast of Brazil, and we actually know what can happen when people become stranded here. In 2019, a fishing boat capsized nearby during a violent nighttime storm. 4 men swam for hours and reached the island at dawn. They then survived for 3 days by eating green bananas and collecting rainwater, until a group of divers finally found them. None of the men were bitten, which is important because Snake Island is not the instant death sentence often described online. But across an area of only 430,000 square meters, or 106 acres, live around 3,000 golden lanceheads, a venomous species found nowhere else on Earth. Their ancestors became trapped here by rising seas around 11,000 years ago. With no rodents available, they adapted to hunt migratory birds and began spending much of their time in bushes and trees. So the danger is not only beneath your feet, it may be wrapped around the branches you reach for while searching for food or shelter. The snakes do not hunt humans, and stories that their venom melts flesh or is 5 times more powerful than mainland species are myths, but a bite would still be a medical emergency. Your best chance would be to remain on the exposed coastal rocks, collect rainwater, and avoid the forest entirely. But there is no beach, almost no protection from the sun, and most of the island's food and shelter are hidden inside the same vegetation as the snakes. The 4 fishermen proved that survival here is possible. They also had rain, bananas, and an enormous amount of luck. Snake Island begins the list because its main danger can be avoided. On the next island, there may be nowhere safe to stand when the ground itself explodes. From the snake-covered forests off the coast of Brazil, we go more than 11,000 kilometers, or 6,800 miles, to the volcanic waters of New Zealand. Here, the threat is not something you can avoid by watching where you step. It comes from the island itself. This is island number 8. Whakaari, also known as White Island, lies 48 kilometers, or 30 miles, off New Zealand's North Island. Only the summit rises above the ocean. Most of the volcano remains underwater, meaning anyone stranded here would be standing directly inside the open crater of New Zealand's most active cone volcano. Even without an eruption, survival would be difficult. The island has no natural source of fresh water. Most of the crater is almost completely barren, and the available pools are hot, acidic, and surrounded by vents releasing volcanic gases. The rusting remains of an abandoned sulfur mine could provide some shelter, but the gases have been corroding those buildings for nearly a century. The greatest danger comes from water trapped beneath the crater. Heated far beyond its normal boiling point and held down by enormous pressure, it can suddenly flash into steam if the system breaks open. That is what happened on December 9th, 2019. The eruption lasted only 1 or 2 minutes, but it sent a fast-moving surge of scorching steam, ash, rocks, and gas across the crater floor. Of the 47 people on the island, 22 eventually died, while many survivors suffered catastrophic burns. For a stranded person, there would be almost no useful warning and nowhere nearby to escape. The practical landing area sits inside the crater, directly in the path taken by previous eruptions. Reaching higher ground would mean climbing unstable, chemically weakened slopes while breathing sulfur dioxide. White Island ranks only 8th because an eruption might not happen during your stay. Without one, the island lies within helicopter range, and would be far easier for rescuers to locate than most places still to come. But until they arrived, you would have no drinking water and no way of knowing whether the steam rising from the crater was normal activity or the beginning of another explosion. From the volcanic waters of New Zealand, we traveled to the cold northwest coast of Scotland. Here, the island itself was not naturally dangerous. It was deliberately turned into one of the most contaminated places in the world, then abandoned for nearly half a century. This is island number 7. Had you been stranded on Gruinard Island at almost any point between 1942 and 1990, it would almost certainly have been the worst island on this entire list. Not because it lacked food or shelter, but because part of its soil contained an invisible biological weapon. During the Second World War, British scientists brought around 80 sheep to the island and tied them near a bomb filled with anthrax spores. When it exploded, a brown cloud drifted across the animals. Within days, they were dead. The experiment proved that anthrax could be released as a weapon, but it also made Gruinard too dangerous to return to its owners. Warning signs were placed around the shore, public access was prohibited, and the island remained quarantined for 48 years. For someone stranded here during that period, the terrifying part would be not knowing where the danger was. Anthrax spores cannot be seen, smelled, or tasted. They could enter through damaged skin or be inhaled, and symptoms might not appear until long after the initial exposure. The mainland is only about 1 kilometer or 0.6 miles away. You could see safety across the water while having no idea whether the ground beneath you had already infected you. More than 40 years after the experiment, researchers were still finding live spores within the upper 3 inches of soil around the main test area. In 1986, teams soaked the contaminated ground with formaldehyde mixed with seawater and removed the worst sections of topsoil. Sheep were then allowed to graze across the island for 5 months and none became sick. Gruinard was officially declared safe in 1990, which is why it cannot rank higher today. There is no confirmed evidence that dangerous anthrax remains, and rescue from this close to Scotland would be realistic. But the island is still uninhabited, and the organism survived there far longer than anyone originally expected. The government says Gruinard is safe. Who knows whether one forgotten patch of soil could still be deadly? From the contaminated shores of Scotland, we travel more than 6,200 miles south to an island whose name describes exactly what being stranded there would mean. It is called Inaccessible Island, and its cliffs can make leaving almost as difficult as surviving. This is island number 6. Inaccessible Island lies 40 kilometers or 25 miles from Tristan da Cunha, the nearest inhabited island, which is itself ridiculously isolated. That distance is not enormous. The problem is that almost the entire coastline rises directly from the ocean in steep cliffs, while powerful Atlantic swells make the few possible landing points dangerous for days at a time. In 1821, the ship Blendon Hall crashed here in heavy fog. More than 80 passengers and crew reached the shore, but 2 men drowned during the landing. The survivors then spent 4 months trapped on the island through the southern winter. They built shelters from wreckage and survived on wild celery, seabirds, seals, penguins, and whatever else they could catch. Among the wreckage washed ashore were pens, a writing desk, and bundles of the Times newspaper, but apparently no usable ink. So, one of the passengers, Alexander Gregg, began writing along the margins of the newspaper pages, using blood taken from the penguins they killed for food. Those pages survived. His journal was later published, which is why we know so much about what happened during those 4 months. Food was not their greatest problem. They could see that survival on the island was possible. What they could not do was leave. 6 men built a small boat from pieces of the wreck and attempted to cross the 40 kilometers, or 25 miles, to Tristan da Cunha. They disappeared and were never seen again. A second group later made the same journey, reached the settlement, and finally brought rescuers back. That history explains both why Inaccessible Island belongs on this list and why it does not rank higher. There is fresh water, edible vegetation, and enough wildlife to keep someone alive. But without wreckage, tools, or other people, escape would be nearly impossible. You could remain alive for months, only 25 miles from help, while the cliffs and ocean kept anyone from knowing you were there. From the cliffs of Inaccessible Island in the South Atlantic, we go nearly 14,000 kilometers, or 8,600 miles, into the Central Pacific. Today, it is called Starbuck Island, but one of its earlier names described the survival problem much better: Starve Island. This is island number 5. Starbuck Island is a flat strip of coral in the Central Pacific, only 5 meters, or 16 feet, above sea level at its highest point. That makes it difficult to see from a ship until the surrounding reef is already dangerously close. Several vessels have been wrecked here, including the French transport Rockall in 1870. Its crew remained stranded on the island for 35 days before they were rescued. One of Starbuck's former names was Starve Island, although food would not necessarily be your first problem. The island supports an enormous colony of sooty terns, estimated at around 1.5 million breeding pairs. There are also eggs, rats, turtles, and other seabirds. For someone willing and able to catch them, starvation could be delayed for quite some time. Water is different. Starbuck has no natural freshwater source. The lagoons covering parts of its interior are hypersaline, making them even less drinkable than the ocean, and some periodically dry into deep, salty mud. Most of the vegetation grows no higher than your ankle, so there is almost no shade from the equatorial sun. Your survival would depend almost entirely on rain and whether you had anything capable of collecting it. There are a few palms and ruins left from 19th century guano mining, which might provide limited shelter, but the island is now uninhabited, protected, and rarely visited. The nearest inhabited island is roughly 850 kilometers, or 530 miles, away. Alone, with nobody aware of your location, you could be surrounded by millions of birds and still die from thirst within days. Starbuck was once called Starve Island. For a stranded person, Thirst Island might have been more accurate. From the empty coral flats of the Central Pacific, we travel more than 8,000 miles to the Bay of Bengal. This is where the real heavy hitters begin, starting with the most famous island on the list. Here, the danger would not begin with thirst or exposure. It could begin the moment you were seen. This is island number 4. North Sentinel Island covers roughly 23 square miles and is surrounded by a wide coral reef in the Bay of Bengal. Unlike most islands on this list, it is not barren. It has dense forest, a warm climate, and enough natural resources to support a community that has lived there for generations. Under almost any other circumstances, those would greatly improve your chances of survival. Here they create a different problem. The island is home to the Sentinelese, one of the world's most isolated indigenous peoples. They have repeatedly rejected outside contact, and India enforces a 3-mile exclusion zone around their territory, partly because diseases carried by outsiders could be catastrophic for them. Approaching the island is both illegal and dangerous. In 2006, 2 fishermen fell asleep in their boat while fishing nearby. Their anchor failed during the night, and the current carried them onto the shore. Both men were killed. When an Indian Coast Guard helicopter later attempted to recover their bodies, islanders fired arrows toward it, forcing the mission to be abandoned. 12 years later, another outsider entered illegally and was also killed. Authorities watched the island from a distance, but ultimately left his body there because recovering it risked another confrontation and could expose the Sentinelese to disease. Your best strategy would be to remain on the outer beach, avoid approaching anyone, and signal aircraft or boats beyond the reef. But the beach is exposed, the forest belongs to the islanders, and crossing the reef without a boat would be extremely difficult. On North Sentinel Island, every additional hour increases the chance that someone finds you before rescuers do. From the tropical forests of the Bay of Bengal, we go to the frozen edge of Antarctica, where the danger is no longer being found too quickly. It is the exact opposite. Here, pack ice, vertical cliffs, and violent weather could keep every possible rescuer far from shore. This is island number 3. There are many uninhabited islands around Antarctica that would be worse places to be stranded than almost everything near the beginning of this list. But Peter the First Island may represent them better than any other. On Google Earth, it looks like an enormous block of ice and snow dropped into the middle of an empty ocean. There are no trees, no buildings, and almost no exposed ground. It is one of the most unsurvivable environments on Earth, hundreds of miles from the nearest permanent human presence. The island was discovered in 1821, but the explorers could not get within 15 miles because of the surrounding pack ice. More than a century passed before the first confirmed landing in 1929. Even today, reaching the shore is an expedition in itself. Around 95% of Peter I Island is buried beneath ice. Most of its coastline consists of vertical cliffs or an ice wall rising roughly 130 feet, or about 40 meters directly from the ocean. Only 3 places are considered practical for landing, and for much of the year, pack ice blocks all of them. The island's highest point is Lars Christensen Peak, an ice-covered volcano rising 1,640 meters, or 5,381 feet, above the sea, and it has never been climbed. For someone stranded here without equipment, moving inland would mean crossing glaciers filled with hidden crevasses. Remaining near the coast would leave you exposed to freezing wind, waves, and almost no natural shelter. Seals and seabirds occasionally reach the coast, but there are no trees, almost no vegetation, and nothing useful from which to build shelter or start a fire. Your best chance would be to remain near one of the 3 landing sites and hope another expedition appeared. But it took humanity 108 years just to complete the first landing, and the island's highest point is still waiting for its first visitor. From the frozen edge of Antarctica, we travel more than 2,000 miles across the Southern Ocean to an island often described as the most remote on Earth. On this next island, rescuers could know exactly where you are and still be unable to reach you. This is island number 2. Bouvet Island is a 19-square-mile Norwegian territory almost completely buried beneath glaciers, more than 1,000 miles from the nearest land. Its isolation is so extreme that after it was first sighted in 1739, incorrect coordinates meant nobody could find it again for 69 years. Even today, reaching it is extraordinarily difficult. Around 89% of Bouvet is covered by ice. While cliffs rise as high as 500 meters, or 1,640 feet, along parts of the coast, there is no harbor, no dock, and almost nowhere a boat can safely land. Most expeditions arrive by helicopter from a ship waiting offshore. But Bouvet is frequently hidden beneath dense fog and low cloud, meaning rescuers could know your exact location and still be unable to reach you. Its strangest discovery came in 1964, when an expedition found an unmarked 20-foot lifeboat floating in a lagoon. Nearby were 2 oars, pieces of wood, and a metal tank, but no bodies, camp, or explanation. The boat was probably left behind by a Soviet expedition trapped on the island by a storm 6 years earlier. Even with a ship nearby, they needed a helicopter evacuation. When another team returned 2 years later, the boat had vanished. Bouvet also swallowed a Norwegian research station. It was built in 1996, but when scientists returned in 2007, both the station and the ground beneath it had collapsed into the ocean. A newer station could provide shelter, but it is seasonal and normally empty. Reaching it might require crossing glaciers and unstable slopes. Otherwise, you would have ice but no easy way to melt it, wildlife but no reliable way to catch or cook it, and almost nothing for fire or shelter. On Bouvet Island, even the things humans leave behind have a habit of disappearing. From the glaciers of Bouvet Island, we travel more than 8,000 miles north to the stormy North Atlantic. The most remote island on Earth takes second place to something far smaller. No ice cap, no wildlife colonies, no research station, just a bare rock with no fresh water, no vegetation, and almost nowhere to stand. This is island number 1. Rockall is barely an island at all. It is a single piece of granite rising 17 meters, or 56 feet above the North Atlantic. At its base, it is only about 80 feet wide and 100 feet long, while the only place where someone can realistically remain is a narrow ledge known as Hall's Ledge. There is no fresh water, no soil, no vegetation, and nowhere to escape the wind or waves. Yet Britain, Ireland, Iceland, and Denmark have all argued over rights in the surrounding waters, largely because of valuable fishing grounds and possible oil and gas beneath the seabed. The rock itself cannot support anyone. In 2014, Nick Hancock attempted to prove just how long a person could remain there. He arrived with drinking water, food, solar panels, communications equipment, and an 8-foot survival pod bolted directly onto the ledge. His plan was to stay for 60 days. After 4 weeks, a severe storm struck during the night. Waves crashed over his position, moved the pod, and tore several barrels of food and equipment into the ocean. Hancock later said he had never been so frightened. He rationed what remained and eventually survived alone on Rockall for 45 days, setting a new occupation record before ending the attempt early. That sounds impressive until you consider everything required to keep him alive. Years of preparation, a purpose-built shelter, stored water, emergency food, and equipment physically attached to the rock. Without those supplies, there would be almost nothing you could do. Rainwater might collect briefly in small cracks, but only if you had something to store it in. Seabirds occasionally land here, but there is no fuel, no shelter material, and almost nowhere to sleep without remaining exposed. Every other island on this list offers at least something that could keep you alive. Rockall offers almost nothing. You would be stranded on a rock barely larger than a house, surrounded by hundreds of miles of ocean, waiting for water, rescue, or the next wave to arrive first. That is why the worst island to be stranded on is barely an island at all. After all of this, one question remains. Which island on this list do you think would be the hardest to survive, and what would your strategy be if you were stranded there? Let me know in the comments. Before you go, in my previous video, I asked you to like and comment because the algorithm was barely showing them to new viewers. You guys actually did it, and it genuinely worked. So please, let's keep it going. Leaving a like or a comment would mean a lot and help this channel continue reaching more people. Thank you so much for watching.